This video hurt or help Cap's case of making it back to the league?
I think it helps because it keeps us talking about him and thinking about him. And look, I'd like to see him throw a football, really, because now because he was unfairly drummed out of the league. And by the way, why was he unfairly drummed out of the league? Like, we need to talk about that for a second. I've mentioned this point before, but essentially, when you're talking about police interactions with communities of color and how that goes down, and he's protesting that really more broadly, what he's saying is, because I'm an American, I get to have this uniquely American kind of protest. Because we don't live in a place where you're not allowed to not stand up, where you are allowed to not stand up for the national anthem, because we live in America. And so, and even after he offended a lot of people by sitting, he said, okay, I'll take a knee because that's respectful, right? He was trying to respectfully protest the idea that we are not always striving to make a more perfect union, that we're not living up to our ideals. And what specifically, or what broadly is he talking about? Social justice, racial inequality, and social justice. That's really, now, since he took that stance, or rather that knee, has that situation gotten better or worse? Is it more on the forefront of our minds or less?
Way better.
There are more, I'm saying the social injustice.
The situation in terms of people protesting, like their ability to.
There are toddlers in cages in the United States of America, and they come from brown countries, right? I mean, this is happening. It's more on people's minds than ever. And Colin Kaepernick's stance now, like what he was protesting seems mild. You'd say what he was protesting was kind of run of the mill. This injustice has been going on in America since time immemorial. Much bigger things have happened since then that shine a light on, or I shouldn't say bigger things, newer things have happened that shine a light on this very issue. He took the settlement. So the lawsuit's over, right? Everything. Right. He wants a chance to work. He wants an opportunity to work. And he deserves a chance to show whether he can be one of the 64 best players at his position in the world, which is what you have to be in the NFL.
Right.
When last seen he was, I would have liked to see him throwing the football rather than just lifting weights, but maybe that's to come.
Well, I think for him, this helps in this way. We know that what Colin Kaepernick was it was just. It was done in the correct way, and it's what being American is about. It's actually one of the beautiful things about being American, being able to have an opinion and find ways to get those opinions out, find ways to help people who are not in a position to help themselves, find ways to give voices to movements that don't have a voice that people are willing to listen to, and that's what he was. And I don't know if there's anybody who can look back at that situation or look back at that protest and say, you know what, that was just the beginning. That was just the start. What he was actually protesting isn't something that was the be-all of the injustices that are going on. It was just one piece of it. And so now looking at why he wasn't playing, and he's reminding us of another thing, how long he's been kept away from not just playing, Max, but from having the opportunity. Right? There's a difference that if he was given an opportunity, if he was walked into buildings and he was talked to and he was worked out and they actually got to see him throw and they said, you know what? We've watched you do it and you cannot. We do not believe you are a good enough player to help us. We do not believe you are one of the 64 best that do the job you do. That's a different situation. What he's showing us is, I wake up at every time this morning. I go work out the 5 days a week for the 3 years because I'm not being given the opportunity. And even though whenever you have a Colin Kaepernick conversation, you have to frame it in why he's not playing anymore, right? That's part of it. I think the other piece that this gave us an opportunity to is talk about that he still isn't playing. And so for Colin Kaepernick, I think this was something that he needed to do, that had to be done if he was going to show people that, you know what, I'm not just going away because I got a settlement. I'm not just going away because I don't want to play anymore. I'm still working every day. I'm just not being given the opportunity to show that I can still do it.
The question is really, Colin Kaepernick challenged the status quo. And in terms of social justice along racial lines, the status quo was built upon maybe the greatest moral crime in the history of the world, like among the worst moral crimes in the history of the world. That's what the status quo is built upon. Unless you believe, and I made this point when Snoop was on the show a couple of years ago, unless you believe black people are intrinsically inferior at making money, right? How would you explain the fact that there are no African-American owners in the NFL? Right? How would you explain that? You mean to so all 32 owners have a certain point of view about this, apparently, and they represent the status quo. That's a fact. The country is more diverse than the ownership of the NFL 100%. Would suggest. But on that level of economic power, it's not as diverse. And so the question is, why is that? Is that because of some intrinsic racial inferiority, or is that because of a criminal history upon which the status quo was built? And that's really what Kaepernick is protesting, the power imbalance. And I mentioned a couple years ago, the irony is, as a result of his pointing out that power imbalance, really, the power is showing itself to be what he's saying. He doesn't have a job. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.